How about now?
I can hear you.
Can you see me?
I can't see you yet.
Huh. I wonder what I have to do.
Are you on an iPhone?
I am.
There's probably a setting somewhere there. If you look at the bottom of your
Okay,
Zoom,
wait a minute. Yeah, here we go. Oh, shit.
you could turn on video.
Um,
Yeah, now it's muted. I see that it's muted. If you hit audio again, if you click that, maybe it will unmute you. And if you click video, it should bring your camera up. It's always at the bottom left of your on Zoom over there. And we'll admit you again here.
okay,
Yes.
so mute, start video. Oh, God.
Start video.
Now, yeah, but it left in about 1 second.
There,
Oh,
I saw you for a sec. There you go. There you go. Hey, modern technology.
God.
Did you just get that? Did you upgrade to another phone? Is
No,
because that always happens every time you get a new phone. It's like they move something somewhere else. It's always, it's always tough to try to find things.
right. So I'm thinking I may not want to hold my phone for the whole time.
Yeah, if you
Let's
want to
see.
set it in a comfortable place, that's fine.
Well,
And if you give me too much headroom, I could always put your font right over your head. I do that a lot. Um, can you put it on its side
sure.
so we get 16 by 9? There you go.
You
Yeah.
know what? I'll probably just have to hold it.
And people have done that too in the past. That's fine. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. How are you doing this morning? You're over in Boulder, Colorado?
I'm in Westminster in Denver, which is close to Boulder, but not in Boulder.
Very good. Very good. How is
And
it
where
out
are
there?
you at?
Yeah, Atlanta, Georgia.
Oh, okay.
It's a nice time of year. It's not too bad. We got through some really horrific storms. They were saying, oh, these twisters were headed towards us. And thankfully, the twisters didn't come this far over, but it's already a rocky spring. We're about ready to go into another drought, I think. So we
Yeah.
do, we can get wildfires like you do out west. It's maybe not as bad, but they can contain them a little bit quicker. But wow,
Right.
you've had some doozies out there in Colorado all the way to California more recently.
Yeah, and actually, Colorado has had the mildest winter I pretty much ever remember. We had, many, many weeks of 65 degrees, and the storms will form all over the Rockies and give us a little rain or a little bit of snow and then move to Kansas and have blizzard conditions. So we've been pretty lucky. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So ski season wasn't as good up that way. They had a
Oh no, I mean ski season's great. They have 180 inches or something, but we down here in Denver have been had a real mild deal.
yeah, yeah. You get up into the mountains, I'm sure. So Breckenridge, all those ski resorts, it
Right.
must be good. Good stuff out there and beautiful out that way as
Well,
well.
I'm glad we're on together, Bob.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's always it's fun to catch up with you. I had you on a little while ago when your friends and family project first took off. How long was that, a year or two ago now? I'm losing track.
It was closer to 2 years,
Yeah.
and so are we starting now?
Oh yeah, we're going. We're
Okay.
going.
Yeah, that was 2 years ago, and did really pretty well for us last year. And it went so well getting some attention that my record label and manager said, let's do Friends and Family too. So I've just now, a few months ago, finished a whole new record with a whole new set of 12 songs under the same concept, which was um, Firefall. The original Firefall guys played in other famous bands like the Birds and the Flying Breeder Brothers and Spirit and JoJo Gunn and and Graham Parsons and Emmylou Harris in my case. And we expanded that concept to do back in the 1976 when our first album came out. We got to tour with just about all the top bands in the in America, including the Doobie Brothers and Fleetwood Mac and Leonard Skinner and Loggins and Messina. So we got a whole new album coming out.
What was that like opening up for like Fleetwood Mac? I always was like, and you were that were the top of their game in that Rumors tour.
Oh
It
man.
must have been like electric.
Well, yeah, it was totally electric. And you know, when we started opening for Fleetwood Mac, our first gigs were like in either sold out stadiums of 60 to 70,000 people
Wow.
or sold out NBA basketball arenas of 20,000 people. And, one of the reasons Fleetwood Mac and other big bands liked Firefall as an opener was because we had the hits. We were a good band that had come from being a club band, so we could kind of get on stage and play without a sound check. And we could play a really good 40-minute set or whatever it was before they came on. So we got to play with just about everybody, which was unbelievable.
Yeah, that'd be so inspirational. And I know Mick Fleetwood was, and I think we talked about this last time, but Mick Fleetwood was just so instrumental in your growth as Firefall was just, getting bigger and bigger. It must have been fascinating to have him involved and really kind of mentoring you in a way.
Well, he mentored us for about 2 weeks.
That's all you need, really.
Uh, yeah, and
Crash
hey,
course.
if you're Mick Fleetwood in the biggest band in the world, 2 weeks is great.
Yeah.
He We toured with them a lot during the White Album for them, and then into
Yeah.
Rumors, we were one of their main opening acts of choice, and then he and Limited Management decided they wanted to be our manager. And so they actually became our manager and went and negotiated um, some stuff with Atlantic Records and came home with a really big check. And our lawyer out in Mick's mansion out in Bel Air, we had a really big meeting. And though we were staring at a $500,000 check made out to us,
Yeah.
uh, our lawyer told us, this contract is kind of worse than the one that we are getting out of. And our business manager, kind of a crooked guy, said out of 500 grand, we're going to pay each guy in the band $5,000. And we went, what?
Oh,
You're going to pay
gosh.
us 30 grand out of 500 grand? We're the band, damn it. So we ended up not going with Mick.
You hear these stories, and it's like amazing. It's like these people have been on the radio. You think, oh my gosh, they're it's a cash cow. They're doing so great, but God, you hear about these horrible management deals and just sleazy people in the business just more
Right,
than profiting off of it.
right. Well, so many artists and bands got totally screwed by their managers or combination managers slash agents slash record label that that was kind of the norm for a while. And I mean, when you go back and look into like Billy Joel's early days, he had something like 3 or 4 gold records and didn't see a penny.
Yeah, yeah,
He
it's
made
insane.
his money on the road,
Yeah,
but where he should have been making, lots and lots of money for having 10 songs on an album or something, um, totally got screwed. Same thing with um, lead singer of Creedence Clearwater. It's like,
yeah. John Fogerty went
yeah,
through
John
so
Fogerty couldn't
much.
think of.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, so Firefall got screwed contractually, and it was interesting because the band I mean, our first album came out, and as I probably told you last time, it was said, I still kind of have trouble believing this, but we heard from very good sources that Firefall's first album in 1976 went gold
Yeah.
faster than any album had on Atlantic Records had ever done. And when you think about it, you had Led Zeppelin on Atlantic Records, you had Aretha Franklin, you had the Rolling Stones. You're going, nah, I don't believe that. But they said we went gold faster than any other album, and but the five, the six guys in the band never made any artist royalties because Atlantic Records kept us in the red all the time. And the songwriters made royalties, but none of the rest of us did. So, it was a screwy kind of thing, but, that's how the business was.
Yeah, it's the songwriters. If you want to get into it, you give advice to somebody getting into it. It's get those publishing rights. And, you're a member of the band. No, it's not going to be forever. It's just, you feel like you're part of a family and everything, but it's still a business. When you're talking about Billy Joel, I mean, he's had members of the band, could have been there 20, 30 years, but at some point it does come to an end. And if you didn't get those songwriting publishing credits, then it gets into a financial really tough situation. So yeah, I mean
Right.
it's really tough.
And, I don't really understand how it works today, but writers and publishers aren't really making any money. And you think about Nashville and all the people who goes to Nashville to write country songs and have a hit record. It's like um it's totally changed, and the artist and the writer are getting screwed again. And my only thing that I'm really thankful for is that I ended up becoming the controller and owner of the name Firefall and the band. And so, I get to call the shots when we go out on the road, or are we going to do this or not that, but publishing has taken a nosedive for songwriters, and somebody's making money. I don't know who it is.
Yeah, it's probably big tech these days, the way streaming works. It's like you don't even get like a hay penny for every play. It's like nothing. And yeah, now it's the guys at the top who are running these places. Your Apple, Spotify's, Amazon Music. It's just, it's such a different thing. But it's nice to have the convenience of being able to play. Hey, I could play the first Firefall album anywhere I want, which
Right.
was unheard of back in the day. So yeah, it totally changed. And there's so much talent out there, and it's fantastic. But thing is, now everybody can do it. Everybody gets on, just about anybody can get on Spotify. So
Right.
it's cluttered.
It's cluttered. And, you know, um, a lot of new music that's being put out there that's cluttering, the whole everything is, some of it's not very good.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
I know that I am just so fortunate and happy that my band Firefall played a small role in the 1970s, which was one of the most amazing and greatest decades for new music. And I attribute that actually to, back in the day, if you had songs of your own and a singer that sounded good singing them, record labels would sign you, and they would put out your album and see if it went. And if they really liked it, they'd push it. Um, and so many bands, the Eagles, Dan Fogelberg, Little River Band, Firefall, Loggins and Messina, Kenny Loggins, um, we all had really good songs and radio friendly type of stuff, and consequently were able to get on the radio. But then in the 80s,
Yeah.
um, record labels started, feeling the power, and they wanted to come in and be there when you rehearsed for your new album. And they'd sit
Oh
there in the
gosh.
corner,
Huh.
happened to us one or two times, sit there in the corner with some record guy,
Huh.
listening to your rehearsal saying, I don't think this is a hit. You got anything else? And they wanted to pick songs or give you songs to play or not just let the band be who the band was. And from the 80s on, it got a lot weirder.
Yeah, how creatively stifling that is. I couldn't imagine, you got your A&R guy sitting in there and, they know what hits, certainly, but like they're telling you what to do. And
Right,
it's like, oh my gosh. Yeah, never tell an artist. I think David Bowie spoke to this too as well. It's like you're not real, you're not authentic. Where it really works is like what you want to do, how you want to explore and expand your career. So,
right. David
oh,
got David Bowie got told he wasn't authentic. Wow.
It's like, yeah, I mean, well, that's why he went off and did the projects he really wanted to do. And it's like,
Right,
no, don't sit there and like tell somebody what to do and
right.
tell them how to put the album together. But yeah,
I
Firefall.
remember, I remember because we were in Boulder, Colorado, and some bigwig from Atlantic Records called our manager and said, "Yeah, we're going to send out our A&R guy. When are you guys rehearsing?" Oh well, we're rehearsing next Monday and Tuesday. And sure enough, at Rick Roberts' house, they're knock on the door, and there's an Atlantic Records guy. And I remember very distinctly because Rick Roberts wrote pretty much all of our hits. Our other singer songwriter, Larry Burnett, had Cinderella and had a lot of great songs, but not commercial like Rick did. And, had the A&R guy from Atlantic Records tell Rick, I don't hear a hit. You got anything else? And Ricky's going, how about this one? And he'd play another song, and the guy, nah, you got anything else? And this is a record guy. And
Oh
here we are
gosh.
trying to make our second or third record. It was like, oh my God, it was terrible.
Yeah, and toxic. I mean, how do you get inspired when you're trying to rehearse or record and they're in the room saying, "Yeah, I'm not hearing a single here." It's got to be just crushing.
Right. They weren't there. They played that role for a little while. Excuse me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when it came time to recording the album, nobody was there from the label, and it was a good thing too because for me, the lead guitar player, when I was out in the recording room playing solos on songs, some of which I knew what basically I wanted to play, and other songs just wing it and just play what felt good at the moment. There wasn't a guy from the label saying, that guitar solo kind of wasn't what we were hearing. Can you try something else? I didn't have to go through that.
That's good. So nobody in there saying, "Hey, we need some saxophone." That's pretty big these days.
Yeah, that's right. How about a little flute here? Okay.
Yeah, very big back then. You had Jethro Tull up in your time too, as well. So, like, when you started, like, did Atlantic say, "Hey, I want 3 albums in the next 3 years"? How did that work? What did they contract you to when you first were on with Atlantic?
We had a 7 album deal, and we owed Atlantic Records one album a year. And
Yeah,
then when things kind of got weird and we ended up in our manager lottery, which we had pretty much once a year, when our third manager lottery came around, we needed a new manager. And we picked Mick Fleetwood. He
yeah.
went in and stopped the presses on a record that we weren't really that happy about. But the record label said, "Oh no, it's great," and everything. And Mick Fleetwood went to a meeting with all the bigwigs of Atlantic in New York and said, "I represent Firefall now, and we want to stop the presses." And we stopped the presses and got to redo and add a few songs and made the record a lot better. So when it came out, it went gold real quick, which it probably would not have done had we left it originally how it was.
What one song became a hit and you didn't think was going to become a hit out of your entire catalog?
Uh, I don't really have an answer for that
Yeah.
because um, I thought that we'd have some big songs off our first album we were about 75% of the way done recording our first album. And Rick Roberts came in one day and said, I just wrote a new song, which was You Are the Woman. And
Yeah.
we all listened to it and went, oh, Poppy. Poppy kind of, yeah, okay. And and we kind of all knew, and the producer knew right away that's the first
Yeah.
single, you know, and it ended up not being the first single because nobody had heard of Firefall yet, so they put out "Livin' Ain't Livin'" as the first single to introduce the name Firefall to Billboard and the public. And Living A Living got into the top 40 as a brand new band, and then they put You Are the Woman out, and it was on in the top 10 or the top 20 for like 6 months, and got to number 3 on the Billboard charts. And then suddenly the rock band from Boulder, Firefall, is really a poppy light rock band, with
Yeah.
You Are the
Yeah.
Woman. And after You Are the Woman was such a big hit, Atlantic Records, had they had their way, they probably wanted 10 You Are the Womans on an
Yeah,
album.
exactly. Yeah, that's how it worked. I mean, and you see this in the movie industry too. That's why we have sequels. That's why we have, hey, if it worked then now, we can keep doing this. And so then you're gonna get pigeonholed. Oh, yeah, you're the guys we always hear in the dentist's office. That's really light rock, It's
That's right, light rock. And you know what? Without our light rock hits like You Are the Woman and Just Remember I Love You, we wouldn't have been nearly as big as we ended up being. But when people who only listened at that time to AM radio, they thought Firefall was You Are the Woman. That's it.
yeah,
And
yeah.
here we were playing Mexico and Cinderella and all these other great songs. So it's funny, and I ain't complaining because here I am in my 70s still doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, like they always say, the cliche, the soundtrack of people's lives. But did you see that Yacht Rock documentary? Because you were kind of around that time, but they didn't really seem to like throw you into the yacht rock.
No, I didn't see the documentary. I've seen on Facebook, Michael McDonald talking about how great it turned out and stuff. And no, but it's funny because so many people in the public and many radio and or entertainment people have to have genres. What genre are
Yeah,
you?
right.
Are you yacht
Right.
rock? Are you soft rock? It's like,
What's the
some of
difference?
that
Yeah.
intertwines.
Yeah.
Are you heavy metal or are you, Americana? It's like they want to pigeonhole you and name you, and that's okay. I see the logic in that, but when you get pigeonholed for just one single off an album, and for many years we fought being the lightest of light rock bands.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Gosh.
And then we'd get out and play with Fleetwood Mac during Rumors and kick ass and play rock songs and then play You Are the Woman. And they were people were going, wow, I didn't know these guys rocked so hard.
I know. It's like get the whole album. That's the whole thing with singles versus the album. It's like if you get the whole thing, then that makes sense and you could really vary yourself when you go out on the road, and especially back in those days. So the new album out now, Friends and Family, you got some great covers here. So what inspired this collection? It's really fascinating to really see love the one you're with. I love Stephen Stills. Saw him live a few times back in the day in
Yeah.
the 80s in Cleveland. Just an incredible artist. A great collection of songs here. So, what inspired kicking the album off with a Stephen Stills record,
Well, now you're talking about Friends and Family 2,
too?
which has not been released yet. It comes out in May sometime. The single, Love the One You're With, was our first single before the record was released. And in fact, we have a new single that I just heard about that's being released either now or a few days ago. And it's the Eddie Money's song "Shakin'."
Yeah, yeah. Oh, it
And
rocks. It rocks.
and that's really cool for me because that's a rock song,
Oh
and I
yeah.
get to play my great rock lead guitar stuff. So, excuse me.
Yeah.
No, no, you are the woman there. But in answer to your question, um, about 2 or 3 years ago, our manager, who is also our record label from Sunset Boulevard Records, uh, called and said, the original Firefall guys played in a lot of other famous bands. I named them before.
Oh yeah.
And why don't you do an album of just their material? And I went, well, that's a concept. I like that. And then I suggested to expand that and to include people that we toured with and got to be friends with out on the road, mention them too. Doobie Brothers, Fleetwood Mac, Leonard Skinner, Marshall Tucker. I said, let's include um, those a song of those guys too. And he said, fine. And then, now this is for the first Friends and Family album. Then it came time to pick the songs. And most of the songs, including Angry Eyes by Loggins and Messina, were just a really easy choice.
Sure.
Because Firefall kind of sounded like, that Loggins and Messina song, and we'd really do it justice and could do a great version of that. But then I remember thinking, Doobie Brothers, how many, there's so many Doobie Brothers songs on. What are we going to do? Or Heart. What Heart song should we pick? And our at that time, our new lead vocalist, bass player, John Basaha, said, I could sing, I could sing the heck out of "What About Love" by Heart. And I went,
Yeah.
bingo,
Yeah.
you're not, good. We're there, and so things kind of, because I knew we had to choose very wisely. And then also the consideration was sometimes, like on the Dan Fogelberg song, we did it pretty much like Dan did and didn't really try to change anything. And our version, of course, sounds different than Dan Fogelberg's version, um, because it's Dan singing, it's the guys that he had in his band, and our version was a different person singing it and everything. But then there were some songs like the Doobie Brothers song, Long Train Running, where we kind of stepped out of the box a little bit and played it differently. And at me as producer of that record, it was really cool having the flexibility to do, with utmost love and respect for the original artist, the original song, and the 70s that song came from, we could do what felt right with those songs. And there you have our first album. And the second album, which you mentioned, Love the One You're With, yeah, that one was an easy choice. We didn't have a Stephen Stills solo record on our first album, and we did have a Buffalo Springfield song. But I thought, yeah, and Rick Roberts used to play with Steven,
Yeah.
out on the road also when Firefall wasn't playing back in '78 or whenever, '77. And that was an easy choice. And I asked my friend Cactus Mosier, who is the husband of Winona Judd, if they'd be guest stars on
Yeah.
on that song. And he said, yeah, oh, that's great. In fact, Cactus said to me, I asked him after, he said he'd love to play drums on it, because if you notice on the original Stills version of that of Love the One You're With,
Yeah.
there isn't any drums.
Yeah.
It's all Joe Lala on percussion, and big acoustic guitars and everything. And to me, that song was crying out for drums, to really make it a rock star. So a rock song. So I asked Cactus if he'd play drums on the song, and he said, sure, that'd be great. And then I kind of timidly asked him, do you think your wife Winona would be interested in singing on our song? And here's what he said to me. He said, That's a great idea. I'm sure her producer is going to love it. Yeah, he's really interested in stuff like this. And I went, great. And then he leaned in kind of and said, of course, I'm her producer. and, and I said, well,
Good
great.
story.
Well, great. So we got Winona Judd and Cactus Mosier on I Love the One You're With. And, I'm really proud of that song and really all the album, because for the first time in Firefall's long history, we made one album and now have made a second album of other people's songs. And, doing the best we can to honor that decade, the late 60s into the 70s, which to me, is a decade or 12 or 13 years worth of original music by a lot of bands that will never be equaled. You know, there's great bands in the 80s and 90s and stuff, but it's not like the 70s.
Oh, for sure. And this great collection. Both collections are amazing. Get them wherever you get music. Love that cover of Longer by Dan Fogelberg. Again,
Yeah.
that's in your genre. You all came up together at the same time, pretty much. All these artists you're covering. And Eddie Money, my gosh, I remember when he was coming up and just there was nothing like that. Shaken is just like one of those things that just pumps you up. And you recapture it here on this album
Oh, well,
for
thank
sure.
you.
Yeah.
It was great because as a lead guitar player, um, for instance, on Simple Man of Leonard Skinner off our first record, I didn't really listen to the Skinnerd version of that. We used to tour with them a lot, and they had three of the hottest guitar players going, you know.
Yeah.
And I just knew that if I played my heart and I played solos, ballsy solos, I didn't really need to copy anything. It was going to sound really good, and it did.
Yeah.
Same thing kind of with the Eddie Money song, Shaken. When I first heard it, well, I mean, I heard it back in the day, but when we were looking for, well, now which Eddie Money song should we do? And that one, Shaken became an obvious one. I was thrilled with how ballsy the lead guitar on his original song was, and I went, "Oh boy, this is right
Yeah.
up my alley." And again, I didn't really. I mean, I listened to it, but I didn't cop the licks, other than maybe his introduction ones, just to kind of set the side, so people go, "Oh, wow, this is Eddie Money song." But for me as a lead guitar player, to be able to take off and play on a song as rocking as that Eddie Money song, just fantastic.
Mm, mm. So you toured for the first Friends and Family. You took that out on the road, and how was that received when you would play a lot of those covers live?
Well, we didn't play a lot of those covers.
Yeah.
We, in the last year or two, we've been playing Long Train Running by the Doobie Brothers and maybe throw in one other song by that. But the truth is, for instance, when Firefall's on tour, and like we do a lot, play in packages of 70s bands, and maybe there's three other bands, Pablo Cruz and Orleans and Atlanta Rhythm Section or Pure Prairie League or that kind of stuff. On a bill like that, each band's given 45 minutes to play,
Sure.
and in a 45-minute set, I kind of know the 6 or 7 songs that we have to play.
Yeah.
It's been the same thing for 20 years. You didn't play Strange Way. Or no, we always play Strange Way.
Yeah.
And you have to play You Are the Woman and Just Remember I Love You and Mexico and Cinderella and Living Ain't Living and Strange Way. And there's like 7 right there. So we didn't have a lot of room to say, here's songs from our new album and play 3 or 4 songs. We did sell the album out on, out at the merch table, but we're going to include at least 2 songs upcoming this year once this new record gets out.
Yeah, yeah. That's, yeah, you have to stick with your staples. That's what people came out to hear. You couldn't get away with that. So
That's
if
right.
you
Hey
ignore
man,
that.
I paid all that money and they didn't play You Are the Woman.
Yeah, that would be just horrific. If anything,
Right.
I think the power would have to go out in order for you not to
Yeah,
include
exactly.
that.
Well, one interesting sidelight is now I'm in my 70s now, and our audience is like 50s, 60-year olds, you know, and but a lot of times I'll look out in the crowd when we're on stage playing, and there'll be a lot of 30 and 20-year olds singing the lyrics to our songs.
Hmm.
And it's like, wow. And of course, the reason that is because they were the kids of the parents who played Firefall and Dan Fogelberg and the Eagles all the time at home. So they were exposed to our music back when they were growing up. But it is pretty amazing to think a band as old as us has a lot of 30-year-old fans.
Yeah, I think it would take you to get to your 30s because, like, all the way up probably through a kid's 20s. I have a daughter in her 20s. And it's like, I think when they get a little bit older, then they're okay listening to mom and dad's music because it builds on those memories. They start getting nostalgic once they get up into their 30s.
Right.
So I'm starting to see that. You'll see that now. I see that at Paul McCartney shows or things like that, where it's like, that's nice. It's the gift that keeps on giving, and future generations are discovering the music. And it's like comfort food in a way, too. It reminds them of, the things that gave them the comfort. And,
Yeah,
and
right.
definitely those Firefall songs. I don't know if we talked about it last time, but how you came up with the band's name. It's kind of an interesting Western reference that happens out that way. Was it in Yosemite where it hit you? How you came up with that the band's name?
Um, Rick Roberts, our original lead singer and writer of most of our hit songs back in the early days, um, he knew about Firefall in Yosemite, and we were trying to pick a name, and he said, "How about this?" And we'd go, "Yeah, nah, nah." How about this? Nah. How about Firefall? What? Firefall. Huh. Well, yeah, that sounds okay, I guess. Put it on the list. And by the time we needed a name for our first gig in Boulder, we had like two names on the list. And Firefall was the best one of the two. We said, okay, we'll be Firefall. But I'd never heard of the Yosemite Firefall. I've never been to Yosemite to see a firefall. There's two firefalls, of course. There's every in 2 weeks in November, the setting sun hits Horsetail Falls just right, so it illuminates the waterfall going off a cliff, and they call it the firefall. Now that's a natural firefall. For about 30, 40 years, they've stopped it now, but they used to make a man-made firefall and set off a bonfire on top of a cliff and slowly push it off so that they could have it be more of a tourist attraction and not just once a year.
Oh wow, that's really cool. And I love the logo, how that has developed. The artwork on the albums going back into the 70s is just so amazing. I love looking at your Firefall logo in albums like by Yes. It just artwork meant so much when you would get
It
an
did.
LP. Oh,
It did. And you know what? It's interesting. uh, Behind me is my painting of our Firefall cover. Um, I I did my painting that you're seeing here
yeah.
um, after the album came out, and I sent the art director of Atlantic Records. I sent him two or three sketches of what I thought Firefall could be, and they said that's a great idea. Now, um, when I was thinking of the album cover, now I've been an artist longer than I've been a musician, and one of my favorite artists is Maxfield Parrish, who uh, did all these amazing blue, twilight scenes, and just an amazing illustrator. I was thinking when I started making the concept for this album cover, the first one was, our album's going to be on the wall with 200 other albums. And I want our album to stand up, even though nobody knows who's Firefall is. I want that to just be so dynamic that people will pick up the album just to see what it is, off that record rack of 200 albums being sold. And it really helped, and they took my idea and they said, great, we'll take it from here. I was hoping I was going to paint the first album cover, and they said, oh no, we'll take it from here, kid, thanks. and and they did the original first album cover was a real photograph of a lake in Wyoming in the daytime that then they airbrushed all the dark blue and the comet and this on, and it became, the album cover, I think, fit in perfectly with how great the music was. And that's the key, is how good the music is. And I think I've told you this story before, but when Rick Roberts asked me to start being his lead guitar player for what he thought was going to be his third solo record, we'd be practicing Rick's songs and everything. And then Mark Andes from Spirit and JoJo Gunn, who'd moved to Boulder, joined our practices. And suddenly it didn't feel like a solo record anymore. It felt like a band, And when it felt like a band, Rick Roberts said, I know this guy, Larry Burnett in Washington, D.C., who writes great songs, and he and I sing great together. You want to hear a song of his? And Mark and I went, sure, let's hear it. And it was on a reel-to-reel tape, I remember, as long before cassettes were ever invented. And Rick played his tape of Larry's song Cinderella, and we went, oh, get him out here. So Rick flew Larry Burnett out, and from our first week of rehearsal, this was before Michael Clark, the drummer, got involved. And on our first week of rehearsal, we had 25 original songs to work out. And that's just staggering because, when you start a band, you really don't know what you're going to sound like, and you don't know what songs you're going to play unless you're a cover band. And we knew we were shooting for original songs, and most bands have no idea what they're going to sound like. And here we were with 25 songs to work at in our first week. And a lot of those songs, like Livin' Ain't Livin' and Mexico and Cinderella, we worked out, in the first week of practice before we even had a name. And that's astounding. So in my book, Firefall has primarily been, number one, about songs, really great songs. And then number two, about the singers of those songs and what that sounds like. And then number three, great musicianship, that beefs it up. And that's where I come in.
Yeah, that's what counts. It really does. And, after the yacht rock era, and then they were saying music videos were really taking over. You got into the 80s. Did you all get into doing videos?
We made a few videos, and we had one of our singles in the 80s briefly be played on MTV. Because
Wow.
Firefall certainly isn't an MTV type of band and wasn't back then. And now MTV hardly has any music on it.
Yeah. What
But
did it become? Yeah.
yeah, we made videos, but we were of the, I don't know. It was, we didn't probably make enough videos, and consequently, Firefall was kind of a faceless band. And they go, Firefall,
Right.
fire, oh, you are the woman, or oh, Mexico,
Yeah. Yeah.
But so I wish we would have been able to, have a backer who paid for more videos. But videos, even back then, were pretty damn expensive to make.
Yeah. Yeah. They really were. Now anybody could do them. but
Oh
like
yeah,
back then, oh my gosh, dude, the equipment, everything. I started out, making movies, Super 8 movies and stuff like that. I didn't have money for video equipment, and you were very limited with film, and it was expensive, very expensive. Nowadays, any
right.
kid can shoot anything they want on their phone and upload it to YouTube. They become famous. Gosh, it
Yeah,
goes back to like,
it's
Justin
weird.
Bieber, those
And a
guys.
lot of people don't realize that once you film a song, then there's hours and hours of editing to it. It's,
Yeah.
and there you go. It's okay, editing.
Yeah, yeah, that's very important too, how to tell the story, and you need to be a good editor, and that really does make the song and the video. And then that video is attached to your song forever. Yeah, it's like, and this has
Exactly.
happened
And
in
you
the
make and
80s.
you make a crappy video and that, people remember the crappy song and the crappy video. It's like you
Yeah,
got to be careful.
that's so true. So, going out touring, are you going to be doing a lot of it here this year in 2025? How does that look as far as getting out there on the road?
We are we are touring. I won't say a lot. We are touring weekend warriors, go out and play one or two shows on a weekend. We're going to New York and New Jersey for a 4-day swing, but we don't tour like we used to do. You'd go away for, back in the 70s, I'd be gone for 2 months from my apartment, which meant not only could I not have a dog, I couldn't have any plants in my house. It's like, who's going to water my plants?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but we're weekend warriors now, and it's still just amazing fun to play the shows out on the road, whether it's a short 35 or 40-minute set or whether it's our long 90-minute set or 2 1-hour shows or whatever. But I'll tell you what, the travel part and the hotel part and all the other parts of touring, I don't miss at all. And in fact, I'm kind of glad that we're only playing some this coming year
Yeah.
because I'll tell you what, the grind, the grind from, touring, weeks and weeks at a time is just really tough.
Oh, it is. And recording is just, I would say slightly easier. You're not having to like drag all your stuff all the time. So that's really nice. How
Right.
long did it take to record this set or each set? How long did it take for each volume when you put this together?
Oh, you're talking friends and family here, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Uh, Firefall never made really quick records.
yeah.
I would say it took us a month,
Hmm.
maybe a little bit longer. Now, we live in 5 different states, and so I might be in the studio doing guitar parts and, hey, we need congas and shakers in here. And then I would have to send, what we did to Nashville to have John sing on it or whatever. So it was kind of time consuming. I remember a bit in the old days, one of my favorite bands, Little Feat, with Lowell
Right.
George. Love those
Yeah,
guys.
yeah.
I had heard stories about they'd go into the studio with songs that they were going to record for their new album. And if they didn't get a cut on that one song within 2 or 3 takes, forget it. We're
Oh
not doing that.
gosh.
It'd be like, so they would go in and they'd make an album in like 3 days, which is like, wow.
It's amazing. Yeah. Yeah.
And then and,
Incredible.
and then on the other side of that would be like Steely Dan, who,
Exactly.
would like, they'd have 10 different guitar players on the same song and, and LA, New York, whatever. So it generally has taken Firefall about a month to make a record when you're real focused.
Yeah, and you're in all these different locations, so you're putting files together, and you have a mixer. It's just totally different than how you did it in the old days, straight
Yeah,
up in the studio. Yeah,
that's true.
yeah, way, way, way different. And going to tape, rather these days, all digital, so it's
Right.
just completely a different story. So this album as well, you offer it up on CD and vinyl. Is it available always at your merch tables and wherever you can get music?
We I have heard that we are printing up vinyl on Friends and Family too.
Good.
which the full circle about how that came around. You don't have vinyl on your record, geez. You know, so and you know what? I mean, CDs are kind of obsolete. Everybody just downloads stuff, and that goes back to you know downloads. I mean, I remember hearing many months ago about that song "Happy." I forget the guy who did it. um, Huge worldwide hit. Happy, he had 4 million radio airplays, and he made something like $800 from royalties. And you're going, man. So Rick Roberts and all the old writers of songs, they used to make a lot of money, and now it's like, who knows if they make money or not. I'm just glad that I'm in a band that has hits to play. Here, I'm 74 years old, and I'm still um, making new albums. That's pretty rare. Oops,
Yeah, it's very
I knew
good.
that was going to happen.
It happens at some point. That's true. And there's so many around your age who are just like, oh, they play just the hits, and it's just kind of nice to see, artists now still creating something new. Whether it's you're doing the covers, you're still recording, but and even writing new songs. It's really nice to see
Right.
that. What's
And I'm writing new songs that aren't for Firefall, because Firefall is kind of, we have a, not a pigeonhole, but I could write a really hard charging rock and roll song that doesn't sound anything like Firefall. And
Mhm.
if I had Firefall do that song, people would go, well, I kind of like the song, but that's not Firefall.
Yeah,
Firefall should be Just Remember I Love You.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's kind of cool, because I write a lot of songs, I do a lot of paintings, and I have a lot of free time just to create. And in fact, last night I sat down, picked up a guitar, and suddenly was writing a new song for a new Firefall record, which, after two albums of cover songs like
Hmm.
Friends and Family and Friends and Family 2 are, I know that I want to put out at least a 5 or 6 song new album of new Firefall songs.
Good.
So, it's always a ongoing kind of thing, which I know how lucky and fortunate I am to be in this position.
Yeah, and so hard in the arts, especially, and you're just, so right-brained. I mean, you're doing painting, you put together music. That's really fascinating, and it keeps your mind going. That's what keeps you young and keeps your spirit going, and you
Right.
can just keep on going. That's very inspiring to see that, because it's so hard out there these days when you're young and you really wanted to get into the arts. It's really, really tough.
Right.
So yeah, I definitely give kudos to that. And so many great songs on here. A dozen new songs with the second volume of Friends and Family. You even dig back a little bit into the 60s. I love that I love the Byrds so much. And I remember meeting Roger McGuinn under a bridge in Chattanooga. He played under a bridge. And it was just like one of the best little performances that I could ever remember. It just to see you being inspired by the Byrds is really nice to see that on here. So you want to
Well,
be a rock and
what's
roll star.
interesting about you saying that, on the first Friends and Family album, I mean, we had played So You Want to Be a Rock and Roll Star as our encore song live for years, you know, and I thought that that would be the Bird song that would be on that first record. And we recorded it. And then I just kept thinking, I'm going, let's do that Gene Clark song. You know, the name escapes me right at this moment. That's on the first record. Feel a Whole Lot Better.
Yeah.
One of
Yeah.
my favorite Bird songs. And so I didn't want to put two Bird songs on the first record. So we kind of put Rock and Roll Star in the tank, not knowing we were going to make a second record. And so when we started this record, we already had one song done, Rock and Roll Star. And to me, I mean, the Birds, oh my God.
Yeah.
I was in high school when the first Birds record hit, and course, the Beatles and the Stones, but the Birds, oh my God. And to suddenly graduate high school, I was already a pretty good guitar player. I moved to Boulder to go to college, and Boulder, I mean, Stephen Stills moved in. There's Dan Fogelberg. Hey, Joe Walsh, Richie Fury.
Wow.
Chris Hillman. I started playing in bands with guys from the Birds. Chris Hillman. I was lucky to have totally fallen into Graham Parsons and Emmylou Harrison, the Fallen Angels. So looking back on my history, I got to play with three Birds, Chris
Yeah.
Hillman and Michael Clark, and then a little bit Graham Parsons. I've
Amazing.
sat on stage and we've had Roger McGuinn bring his 12 string on and sit in with us a couple of times. And it's just like, I look at my career and I go, wow, I got to play with some of the Birds.
Oh yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, living the dream.
Living the
Definitely.
dream.
That's great. So inspiring. So great to see you, and best wishes with this new project and touring and new material for Firefall. That's going to be exciting one day. We'll see that come to fruition, and just all the best. Definitely.
Why, thank you. It's been nice. Sorry about my phone shaking a little bit, but
Not too bad.
the next one I do, I'll make sure I put on some stationary position.
Yeah, I've seen much shakier in the past, so that's very good. Yeah, we did really well. I'm so glad you came by today.
Why, thanks. Very nice talking to you, Bob.
Have a good one. Take care.
Okay,
Bye
will
bye.
do. Thanks. Bye.